Welcome to Rethinking Communication. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore how we better connect with each other through the power of our words. For most of us, formal education left gaps in our ability to communicate well with each other, especially when trying to navigate conflict, inspire change, and overcome misunderstandings. I'm a former journalist, a speaking coach, and a communication expert, and my goal is to encourage you to rethink what it means to be an effective communicator, from the stage to the meeting room to the living room and everywhere in between. Welcome back to part 2 of my 6-part series on the communication skills to improve in the age of AI. The last episode, part 1, was all about storytelling, and here today in part 2, I'm going to be talking about how to think on the fly. And that might sound like something that may not be a skill to improve, but my hope is with this series is that you learn how to improve your communication skills and that you do see them as skills and not just inborn talents that people are or aren't born with. Each one of these episodes will hopefully build on each other and build up to an understanding of how to improve on these things, skills that you can actually work on, in the same way as if you were stepping onto a basketball court and learning how to play basketball, or picking up a musical instrument and learning how to play that instrument. Communication and communication skills are just that. They are skills that can be learned. And I hope these short, quick episodes help set you on a path to doing exactly that. Before I get into today's episode, I want to invite you to join me on this journey outside of the podcast here and sign up for my newsletter. It's a once-a-month newsletter. It's called The Follow-Up. That's a harken back to what this podcast used to be called, The Follow-Up Question. But it's a follow-up to everything that I talk about here on the podcast. And you can sign up for that once-a-month newsletter at michaelashford.com/newsletter. The link is going to be in the show notes, and I dive into the techniques of effective communication. Like I said, each month in that newsletter, you can have it delivered straight to your inbox, and you can keep the communication learning going. Hope to see you there. And with that, let's get into part 2, Thinking on the Fly. You know that flustered feeling you get when you're called on in a meeting to give your thoughts, or you're asked to give an impromptu talk in front of your coworkers? No matter where you're at in your life and career, this can be one of the most anxiety-inducing experiences. A lot of people are terrified of being asked to think and speak on the fly, especially in front of others. For years, the CEO of the company I work for dealt with this really all too common torment. Andy, despite having years of experience starting and leading companies, would always write out everything he wanted to say when addressing an important topic with the company, and then he would read those notes line for line. Even when we all turned to remote work during the COVID pandemic in 2020 and we held all of our meetings on Zoom, it was still clear he was reading from his notes, and yet he was frustrated by his hesitance to speak off the cuff. He and I had a lot of conversations about what held him back, what his goals were, and why he felt he needed to write out word for word everything he wanted to say. Gradually, as he and I worked on it together, Andy got better. His addresses to the team became more authentically him. His personality started to shine through as he felt the loosening grip his notes held on him. It all came to this beautiful peak when, at our 10-year anniversary celebration in the spring of 2025, Andy set aside his notes and he addressed the entire company and their significant others with a wonderfully heartfelt and in-the-moment celebration speech. Now, if you struggle with confidence when it comes to off-the-cuff speaking, it can be debilitating, and your career can be stunted as you avoid situations where you might be asked to speak in front of others, especially in an impromptu manner when you haven't had time to prepare or you don't have notes in front of you. And what's more, if you take all of your thoughts to AI to try and craft the perfect response, you lose out on those in-the-moment opportunities to connect, to influence, to drive decisions, and ultimately to create change. So what's the culprit here? What are we dealing with, and how do you address it? Well, based on my experience, things often start to go wrong as soon as you're called upon to speak. In that moment where somebody looks at you and says, "What are your thoughts?" Your brain goes into overdrive thinking of all the things that you could say. And like a deck of cards being shuffled, or perhaps more appropriately, if you ever played the quote unquote game 52 card pickup, you just fling the deck of cards up in the air and every possible answer gets jumbled up and rearranged, and your words become a mishmash of thoughts in your head. When you finally do open your mouth to speak, you don't know where to start. You don't know how it's going to end, and you don't know if you're making any sense. And so here's what so many of my coaching clients tell me goes through their heads in these moments. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And this is closely followed by, I know if I start speaking, I'm going to start rambling, and I don't want to waste everyone's time. And I know that I will. Does that sound familiar, perhaps? So with that dialogue running in the back of your mind, you avoid those moments. You divert your eyes, you maybe shrink in your chair a little bit. All of a sudden, something becomes really interesting outside the window, and you're certainly not volunteering to speak up, even when you've got the relevant experience and the know-how. What's happening here? What's going through your mind? What's going through your body? Well, as Oscar Trimboli explained in episode 100 of my podcast, the average human being can speak an average of 125 words per minute. And when you're nervous or excited, that can actually ramp up to around 150 words per minute when you're just racing and the words are coming out fast. Meanwhile, inside your head, your mind is actually racing along at 900 to 1200 words per minute. That's the average human's thinking speed. That 1200 words per minute is when you're really hyped, when you're anxious, when your blood is coursing through your body, your heart rate is elevated. So what's happening? Your mouth literally cannot keep up with your brain. If 1200 words per minute are flooding your mind and you can only speak at best maybe 150 words per minute, you physically cannot keep up with your brain. And so it becomes so difficult and overwhelming to make sense of all those shuffled thoughts in your head in a way where you feel like you can coherently speak them out loud that you freeze. Or you try to speak and you do end up rambling or over-explaining or going on long tangents, or you avoid the situations altogether. This is the reason why so many people say a fear of public speaking or a fear of standing up and speaking in front of others feels so debilitating, feels so anxiety-inducing, is because they can't connect all the words and thoughts that they have in their brain to what comes out of their mouth, and it feels overwhelming. And it feels like they're not saying the right thing, or they don't want to say the wrong thing. But you can get better. You can get better at impromptu speaking, and you can do it by focusing on these techniques. And believe me, these are not things that you can just all of a sudden start doing today or start doing tomorrow and instantly be better at it. But if you can focus on these techniques, if you can keep these in mind, and if you can practice these first within your own head, and then eventually place yourself in situations where you can practice them around and in front of others, you can get better at this skill of impromptu speaking. I am not asking you to go from, or encouraging you to go from not speaking up in a meeting to trying and stepping on a stage in front of 1,000 people. That's not what I'm talking about here. But these techniques can help you get better at and more comfortable with, and give yourself some grace in the moments where you are asked to speak on the fly. First, I want you to pause before you start speaking. Level set your nervous system by filling your lungs with a nice deep breath, take a beat, and then begin speaking. I promise a short pause isn't as long as it might feel to you. And in fact, it can actually help you appear more calm and controlled to the other people in the room just by taking a beat, just by taking a moment to breathe in, level set, and then begin speaking. Next, I want you to make one point at a time. Remember what I said earlier. You have all the possible answers to everything that you could possibly say running around, racing around in your head. Pick one thing that you want to say and lean into that one thing. and only move on to your second point after you've finished the first. Because guaranteed, you're going to be saying something, another thought will pop up in your mind, and we do have a tendency to jump to that before we finish the first thought. Try to avoid that. Make one point of it at a time, stick with it before moving on. Next, aim to give shorter, more concise answers. Most of the time, you don't need to share all that you know. But there is that pressure, especially in those situations. Let's say you're in a meeting and at work, there is a pressure to say all that you know, to be the expert, to be the one with all the answers. But the quicker you can answer and then give others a chance to build upon what you've said or ask follow-up questions of you, the faster you can get into a rhythm and gain clarity of thought. It is often the start, the jumping off point that creates the most hang-up in our minds. And so if when asked to speak or when you decide I'm going to make the jump and volunteer to speak, if you can give a short, concise answer, you will get into the rhythm that is required to help you feel like I'm now making my points and I've got clarity of thought here. Also, speak slower. In the same way that I want you to pause before you start speaking, try to speak slower. And I know it's easy to say and very hard to do when the pressure's on. I get that. But again, remember, you've got 5 to 6 times more words running through your head than you can speak. And so slowing down as you speak can help you internally gather your thoughts to take all those words running through your head and begin to line them up in their proper order if you're speaking slower. You can gather your thoughts so that you're prepared for what you're going to say next. It gives you a little bit of mental time. And also, don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you need it. If you're asked a question and put on the spot, don't rush into giving an answer based on an incomplete understanding of what's being asked of you. Asking a question can help give you clarity so that you know where to begin, but it also gives you more time to think of what you're going to say as they answer the question that you've asked. You can sound more confident and competent if you ask for clarification and then speak. Finally, I want you to remember that no one knows what you're going to say. No one is in your head. No one has a script of what you're going to say. This was a major unlock for Andy. When he released himself of the pressure to say the right thing or make his points perfectly as he had written them down, he was able to be more himself in his addresses to the company. And people noticed that he showed up and he seemed more authentic in his delivery and what he was saying, and his personality started to shine through. He still wrote down a lot of his key points that he knew he needed to make, and he would refer to them from time to time, and he still does. But the rest, the in-between, he lets his knowledge and experience guide what he wants to say. And in those moments, no one knows if what he says was what he intended to say or not. And that's okay. Now, not ready to speak up just yet? Maybe a little bit skeptical of these things that I've just lined out here? Like I mentioned earlier, practice putting these tips into use in your next meeting or the next time you're within a conversation by just silently crafting your answers to questions or to the discussion in your head. What would you say if you were called upon to speak in this moment? Imagine yourself being the one in front of the room or the one speaking up and deliver your thoughts. Just to yourself, even if you're just practicing in your head, you're still going through the mental motions of practicing the skill and learning to get better. And then, when you're ready, put them to use for real. And know that this is much like, as I mentioned earlier, learning a sport, learning a musical instrument. It does take time and practice. You will not be ready to step on that stage in front of 1,000 people when you're on day one. Practice. Put yourself in situations. Push the limits of your comfort zone and try to put these skills to work. And most importantly, don't outsource what you want to say to AI. As I covered in the first episode of this series, lean into your ability to storytell, to make your points, or to deliver your message. Reflect on what you know to be true and provide your observations, and know that no one can say that your observations, your experience, your perspective are wrong if you present them as simply, here's what I know to be true, or here's my experience, and also no one knows what you're going to say. So let that be a release valve for you. Don't wait until you feel like the public speaking expert or the one with all the perfect words to speak up more. Instead, when you have something to say, release yourself of the pressure to say the right thing and step into that moment as only you can, and slow yourself down and give yourself some grace. That's it for part 2 of this 6-part series. Come back for skill number 3 on the next part of this series, which is going to be all about asking questions. And for those of you who have been a listener of this podcast for a long time, you know I love asking questions. And so I'm going to take a deep dive into what does it actually look like to ask really great questions. You don't have to be a trained journalist like me to ask great questions and have that be a way that you can show up communicatively in a way that presents the best version of yourself in those moments and situations where it calls for it. I'm really excited about part 3 of this series, so I hope you join me. And in the meantime, jump over to my website, michaelashford.com, and join the newsletter, michaelashford.com/newsletter. The link is in the show notes to keep this skill set building process going. I'd love to see you on the newsletter. I'd love to see you in the follow-up newsletter. And until next time, keep asking questions.